Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, February the 20th, 2025. Today, as always, I want to talk about the astrology and the I Ching for today, but I also want to consider the Pope because there have been big concerns about his health. He apparently has double pneumonia, so before doing this video on Friday morning, Pacific time, I just checked the news. Apparently he had breakfast today, and he is, as well as can be expected under the circumstances, and was sitting in an armchair or a chair, reading and praying, and apparently he's stable. That is the picture for today, but I thought I'd look at his chart. I'm not going to make any forecasts about whether he's going to live or die or whatever. I just kind of feel that's a little bit inappropriate, and I haven't calculated any primary directions for him. Primary directions are a technique one can use to try to indicate when someone is going to die, but still I thought I would have a look at his chart at the end of this video. But first of all, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Thursday, February the 20th, 2025. Usual reminder, if you happen to enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I would be extremely grateful if you were to become a subscriber. So here is the chart. Well, actually that's a chart relating to the Pope, but we'll be looking at that in a moment, or not in a moment, at the end of the video. But here is the chart for today, and this is noon today, New York time. You can see that the moon is in Sagittarius. So the moon has been in Scorpio. It's now changed sign, and I won't say it's a relief for the moon to be out of Scorpio. The moon had its own strengths in Scorpio because it was in mutual reception to Mars, but with the moon moving into Sagittarius, that gives the astrology of today a little bit of fire. We've already got Venus in Aries, a fire sign. Now we've got Moon moving into Sagittarius. Moon in Sagittarius, very different energy than Moon in Scorpio. Moon in Sagittarius, by and large, is lighter, and it's more able to deal with variety, and it certainly has a certain excitement about it. But we should never forget that Sagittarius as a sign can be quite opinionated because it's ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter does have a moral code. That doesn't mean to say the moral code is good, doesn't mean to say it's bad, but having a view about what is right and wrong. And the moon goes into Sagittarius at 12:55 p.m. London time. So in London, the moon goes into Sagittarius around lunchtime. So if you're in Europe or Africa, first part of the day, moon in Scorpio, last half of the day, moon in Sagittarius. So there is a bit of a changeover there. But it's not really the moon that is the thing that really matters today, or at least it's not the moon that creates or presents the most important aspects. We do have a square between Mercury and Jupiter, exact square today. Mercury in Pisces, square Jupiter in Gemini, and those two planets are in mutual reception. So normally I would have said Mercury square Jupiter can be a problematic aspect. Mercury, Jupiter, you think, talk too much, think too much, exaggerate, maybe even lie if one feels that that's the right thing to do. Mercury in Pisces. Now, it could be Mercury's mutual reception to Jupiter, that there is a sense in which we're quite good liars. Some of us can be quite good liars, but that doesn't mean we should be lying. It can be about talking too much. But Mercury and Jupiter are in mutual reception, and that means we can communicate effectively, and we can use our brains effectively. And if we make the effort, and because of that mutual reception, it could be quite fortunate for having good ideas. But if we do have good ideas, we have to check them. We have to make sure that everything, really is in order. And I would have said there's another aspect that may be just as important maybe even more important, and that is the Sun sesquiquadrate Mars. Now, there is the Sun, there is Mars, they're 135 degrees apart. And this sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Mars should not be underestimated. We have two masculine, fiery, aggressive planets in aspect 135 degrees, and so that could really stir things up. And it is a day when some people could be very strident, and they may insist on getting their way, or at least they might try their hardest to get their way. And there could be clashes, and there could be a certain animosity there with this aspect. And I thought I would just quickly look at the Sun, Sun's sesquiquadrate Mars, just specifically. Here is a chart of a precise aspect between Sun and sesquiquadrate Mars. The Sun is sesquiquadrate Mars at exactly midday in London, in the UK. That means it's exact at 1 o'clock in the afternoon in continental Europe, or most of continental Europe. I don't know about Spain and Portugal. And then that Sun sesquiquadrate Mars is going to be exact this evening, perhaps very late this evening, tomorrow, maybe very early tomorrow morning if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But it is an important aspect, and just wanted to just show you what it looks like in terms of the 90-degree dial. So let's get a real view of it, because Sun sesquiquadrate Mars on a 90-degree dial, Sun sesquiquadrate Mars becomes an opposition. And so the thing about this Sun sesquiquadrate Mars, it is on the Mercury-Uranus and Mercury-Jupiter midpoints. So there's our Mercury-Jupiter square, which is shown as a conjunction on a 90-degree dial, and there is Uranus. And so this Sun-Mars sesquiquadrate does actually tie up with the Mercury-Jupiter square via Uranus. If we set up the 90-degree dial, and that really does give us a feel that something wants to be free, and something wants to assert itself, and something wants to manifest. And so I actually think that this aspect could be quite explosive, really, really very explosive. Not for us as individuals, I always say this, because when you're dealing with an astrological event, a heavy astrological event, it doesn't affect everyone, and it's more global. But we still, we still live in a world which is tense, because we've now got the peace talks, or the beginnings of peace talks between the US and Russia. They're taking place in Saudi Arabia. Haven't really been following them too closely, but might be attempts to sabotage them. I think a lot of people are trying to sabotage them one way or another, whether it's Ukraine or the European Union. But some other actor might feel they have to do something, or it may be something happening in another part of the world. But it is quite an explosive aspect. I was going to talk about it in the last half of this video specifically, but I thought instead I would look at the Pope. So that's for Sun sesquiquadrate Mars. I would really urge you not to underestimate it. I suspect it may be more important than the Mercury-Jupiter square, although as you can see from a 90-degree dial, the two aspects, Mercury square Jupiter and Sun sesquiquadrate Mars, they kind of get tied into each other through Uranus. So that's the picture for today, set for New York. I mean, very quickly, here's a chart for Sydney. So that's Sydney, Australia, and Sydney, Australia. Oops, that's still no. Here is Sydney, Australia. again, as a representative of Australasia, you can see here that the moon at noon in Australasia, at least in Sydney, is at 24 Scorpio. So that means that for most of the day in Australasia and East Asia, the moon is actually going to be in Scorpio. It's not going to be in Sagittarius. So if you're looking for Sagittarius, then you will have to wait until tomorrow or very, very late this evening. And so if you are in Australasia, you could say that the main aspect is moon opposition Uranus, because the moon at 24 degrees Scorpio is opposition 23 degrees Taurus at noon. But still, that Sun sesquiquadrate Mars and the Mercury square Jupiter are becoming exact, so it's not like you're going to have a completely different experience if you're in Australasia. But yeah, it will be more of a moon in Scorpio day than, say, in the Americas. So moon in Scorpio is sort of more emotional, more intense, trying to keep things to itself. But still, with that moon opposition Uranus, there can be a great deal of obstinacy, and if a lot of people are obstinate, that can create trouble. Turning to the heliocentric picture, heliocentrically, like yesterday, we have a Venus-Mars conjunction. That Venus-Mars conjunction is separating now. Venus is moving away from the conjunction to Mars, but it's still operational, and I think that is the main aspect today. Venus conjunct Mars. Mars is conjunct Venus. Maybe it's Mars is causing the problems here with that conjunction to Venus, and Mars might be raising stress levels. That could be how Mars works. But Venus and Mars is a conjunction which can be about attractiveness and how we make an impression. And some people find us attractive, other people find us not so attractive, and that's how Venus-Mars conjunctions can work. Also, like yesterday, Earth is quincunx Pluto. So there's a lot to work through, and there's a lot to consider, and we shouldn't expect everything on the surface to be what on the surface seems fine. We shouldn't expect it to actually be fine. There may be things going on underneath that we need to make ourselves aware of. So that's the heliocentric picture, and now I want to look at today from a viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, February the 20th, 2025. Aries. The main aspect today is a sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Mars. It is exact, this aspect. And I regard it as quite a heavy-duty aspect. And it's a situation where we've got these two male planets in hard aspect with one another. And some people can be very opinionated, and it's not a good time to be looking for compromise. And if you are an Aries, you are, I think, going to be quite set in your ways, and you're going to want to stand up for your principles, assuming you're in a situation where you have to stand up for your principles. And so ask yourself how you are responding and whether your responses are appropriate, and is it worth the effort? I mean, is it worth expending capital? Capital in terms of your social capital. What is the price of showing irritation? What is the price of holding on to something because you feel it's important? And you have to really consider this. In many cases, it may not be worth the effort. You regard something as important. You put huge amounts of effort into defending it, but really, was it really worth the bother? So pick your fights very carefully, and don't just get into a fight just for the sake of it. So that's one way in which the Sun sesquiquadrate Mars can work. Alternatively, or perhaps as a complement, you're in a strong position. Do you really have to defend yourself with that Sun sesquiquadrate Mars? Maybe you should just respect your own strength and see that you can make things happen. You can do things. So why worry about what other people are doing? Especially with the fact that the Mars is in Cancer, and the Sun is in Pisces. These are two water signs. Maybe you can take action, do dramatic things, but in a way that is subtle, doesn't draw attention to you, but you still accomplish the same thing as if you were to make a lot of noise about it. In fact, if you make a lot of noise about it, that might put you at a disadvantage. Also, we have the moon moving into Sagittarius. Now, quite when the moon moves into Sagittarius depends on where you are. If you're in California, for example, the moon will move into Sagittarius, late morning. Sorry, early morning, very early morning, sort of before dawn. In New York, still pretty early morning. So if you're in the Americas, it really is a moon in Sagittarius day. If you're in Europe, it's afternoon, this evening. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, you might have to wait until tomorrow. But the moon is moving into Sagittarius. And with the moon moving into Sagittarius, that gives you an opportunity to see things from a broader perspective. And I actually think you need a broader perspective. I think you're crying out for a broader perspective, because I think that recently, Scorpio, you just have been... Sorry, you're not a Scorpio. You're an Aries. So Aries, recently you just have been a little too introspective, a little too wound up about certain things, and moon in Sagittarius, it does give you a different view. And the moon in Sagittarius does actually make a sextile to Pluto, and that moon sextile Pluto can be about looking at things in a different way. You get this broader perspective, and when you see the broader perspective, you see what's possible, and you might realize that some of the things you thought were a matter of life and death are actually pretty trivial. So that's the way you should, I think, be handling it, Aries. Don't take anything too seriously, but at the same time, you have to stand up for your own rights, and the concept of freedom remains very important to you. And freedom is not something that you necessarily have to fight external battles about, feeling there are great enemies out there that you have to assert yourself. If you don't assert yourself, you're losing your freedom. It's not like that. And freedom, to begin with, is an internal process. You recognize yourself as being free. You make your own declarations of independence, and you don't have to make a drama about it, and you certainly don't have to go to war about your desire for independence. Taurus, the moon is kind of changing sign. It's moving out of Scorpio into Sagittarius, and this sign change does mean that you're putting a little bit less emphasis on other people and getting completely wound up about other people, regarding other people as being really important and being obsessed about what kind of influence they have. With the moon moving into Sagittarius, you start seeing things in a different way. It's not that you're trivializing anything or you're making light of anything, but you're seeing that there are other possibilities and other ways of doing things, and you also recognize that there is a sense in which you have your own things to do, and that you are responsible for what happens. And that in itself is a serious business, by the way. And so you have a chance to detach yourself from some of the important people in your life, or at least they seemed important over the last couple of days, but maybe at least in the short term they're not quite so important as they used to be. And it's also a time, Taurus, when you need to think about what kind of initiatives are you going to be taking, because I think that you are in an environment where some kind of initiative is probably required of you. The world is pushing you in a particular direction, and you feel that you have to do something. And whatever it is you're planning on doing, it can't be dependent on outside circumstances. What other people want, what other people don't want. These kind of considerations are not anything that you should be bothered about, or not excessively bothered about them, because you can do your own thing in your own way, and it should in most cases be very effective. And the moon, when it does move into Sagittarius, it does make a sextile to Pluto, and that moon sextile Pluto can help you assert yourself without having to think about battles or struggles. It's just about you asserting who you are and not feeling that you're answerable to anyone. And this is especially the case in terms of career, for example, or anything to do with your public status, or how you're trying to make an impression on the world outside. You don't have to be public about it, but nonetheless your actions and your presence can be really unmissable. And if there's anything you want to happen, then I really do think that you can make it happen. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, and other people as well, I've already mentioned the fact that maybe other people should be becoming less important. You've perhaps got other things to think about. But still, in terms of one-to-one relationships, we do have today a sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Mars. I regard this aspect as being very important. I mean, for all of us, regardless of our sign. But Sun sesquiquadrate Mars might represent another person who really wants to get their way, really insistent on getting their way. And they may make a lot of fuss about it, and you might feel that you have to pay attention to them. But, just because people have a large footprint doesn't mean they get attention, doesn't mean they deserve attention. And so, try to see things in a different way. Don't feel that anyone is dominating your life. However much you care about them, however much you feel that you're under their influence, it shouldn't matter. You can watch the fireworks, you can watch people throwing their weight around, but it needn't have any impact on you. Just have a little bit of detachment, and also realize that you've got better things to do than to be worrying about what other people are doing and what other people are not doing. Gemini. Mercury is making a square to Jupiter. This square between Mercury and Jupiter is now exact. And this square, at least from a Gemini perspective, I regard as being something largely fortunate. Mercury is in Pisces, Mercury is in high-profile sector of your chart, square Jupiter in Gemini. It's very dynamic, and Mercury and Jupiter are in mutual reception. They are in each other's signs. So normally one might regard a Mercury square Jupiter as being a little bit unfortunate. Mercury in Pisces doesn't function very well in Pisces, but it's in mutual reception, so it's fine in Pisces. Likewise, Jupiter's in Gemini, in mutual reception to Mercury. Mercury and Jupiter strengthen each other, and Mercury and Jupiter are both in important angles in your chart, the two most important angles of your chart. The sign itself, whether it's your rising sign or your sun sign or your moon sign, however you're reading these forecasts, and also Mercury in that high profile sign Pisces. And so that means, Gemini, that it's a day when you really can make things happen, and you have a clear sense of who you are, what you're here for, what you can do, and if you've got ideas, you should have no difficulty expressing these ideas, and being able to express these ideas in a very clear, structured and disciplined way. Just because you've got Mercury square Jupiter doesn't mean you have to be chaotic about it. In fact, with Mercury square Jupiter, you have an opportunity to do something really special, but you need to have a little bit of discipline, because Mercury square Jupiter, even though the two planets are in mutual reception, can get out of control. I mean, Mercury is your ruler, and Jupiter can escalate, and just keep escalating, and then you might not have a clue what's going on anymore. You don't want to go down that road, and you needn't go down that road. And you need to, decide what is important. You can't be doing wonderful things in lots of different areas, even though Mercury square Jupiter might tempt you in that direction. You've got to decide what matters, and I think that means putting yourself first, and really being a little bit selfish about it. I do remember the 1980s, and I think it was in the 1980s that it was peak Gemini hatred. I got my son in Gemini, and so many people said they hated Gemini. I just heard it a lot. There was a time when it was the worst sign of the 12, when it was regarded as being the worst sign. And if I remember rightly, what people were saying about Gemini, for reasons best known to themselves, that Gemini was totally self-obsessed, totally into itself, completely selfish, could detach itself from other people's needs, could just pursue its agenda regardless. And that sounds bad, but in this case, like today, that's probably what you should be doing. You can't be there for everyone, and you can really push forward with what you want to do, but just concentrate on one or two things, even one thing. It has to be two things because you're a Gemini, it's a double-bodied sign. So concentrate on two things, but not 3, 4, 5, 6 things. That is quite unnecessary. And if people accuse you of being selfish, that's just too bad, isn't it? Though, from a relationship perspective, things may also be quite good, because Mercury and Jupiter as a pair in the Gemini chart are about relationships. Jupiter can represent another person, and it's a square aspect, so you and another person have a lot to do with each other. Your relationship is not 100% easy because it's a square, but Mercury and Jupiter are in mutual reception. So, Gemini, it might be a time when you and another person can work on something. You understand you have different viewpoints, and those different viewpoints need to be respected, and they can help each other. It's always good to see a problem from two different views, and it's not Mercury Jupiter opposition. It's a square, and in mutual reception. So you can really benefit from another person and another person's approach. And in terms of close relationships, probably this Mercury square Jupiter is pretty fortunate, especially as the moon is moving into Sagittarius. So moon moving into Sagittarius, your opposite sign, is a time when you can understand other people, have some appreciation of their needs, you don't necessarily need to give people what they need or what they want, but at least you appreciate what people want and what their motivations are. So from a relationship perspective, I actually think you can get the balance right. You can look after your own interests, no problem, but you can also find ways of cooperating with certain people. And if we're talking about an existing relationship, I think that something very constructive can start to happen. Cancer. The moon is changing sign. It's moving from Scorpio into Sagittarius. And with this sign change, it may feel that some things are getting a little more serious. Things aren't maybe as straightforward as they used to be. And you can't be quite as spontaneous as you'd like to be. Now that might sound strange with the moon moving into Sagittarius, because one always, or at least often, associates the sign Sagittarius with spontaneity. But we're talking about the Cancerian chart. We're not talking about the Leo chart, for example. So for you, when the moon goes into Sagittarius, you have to think about actually what needs to be done, and you can't do everything. And perhaps over the last couple of days, as the moon has moved through Scorpio, something has been released, something has been actualized, and now you have to do something about it. It needs to be put in its place, and you can see where the place is. Moon in Sagittarius, you get the picture. You understand how things should be. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to spend a lot of time agonizing. You just know where everything should be. You know how to place everything, and left to your own devices, things move forward in a sort of steady and structured kind of way. And Cancer, you might also think that at some level this is a last chance, that if you don't sort something out now, then in the end things could disintegrate into chaos. And I say that because we're at that sort of last quarter stage of the lunar cycle. So, the moon is in early Sagittarius, the sun is in early Pisces. Even if the moon is still in Scorpio, as it was if you're in Australia all day pretty much, or New Zealand, even then you're approaching that last quarter phase of the moon. And the next stage of a moon is the new moon, and the new moon I think is on February the 28th. And so with this last quarter moon, you may feel that it is just a time to be sort of wrapping things up, and to taking the things that you now understand and you now realize perhaps you're good at, taking things that really are working well in your life, but putting them to work, and making sure that all of the things you're doing can really function properly. And I do think that is so important. And as far as lunar aspects are concerned, the moon makes an opposition to Uranus if you're in Australia or New Zealand. It's making a sextile to Pluto if you're in the Americas, and to an extent and also in Europe to an extent. So Cancer, that means that if you are in Australia, New Zealand, moon opposition Uranus, it may be a day when things don't entirely work to plan. Moon opposition Uranus can be about a certain amount of instability. Perhaps people are very set in their ways and they refuse to budge, and if you've got two people that refuse to budge, then something might happen. There might be something explosive or fairly explosive might unfold. And if you're in the Americas and Europe, the moon is making a sextile to Pluto. And if you're in Australia, you will get that moon in sextile to Pluto tomorrow. This moon sextile Pluto is about being yourself, and it's about renovation and taking what you are and taking how you've been in the past and just refreshing it all. And at some level, things do have to change, and it's actually quite a personal process. And then we have this big aspect. I regard this as the most important aspect today, is Sun sesquiquadrate Mars. Now, the reason that aspect is important for Cancerians is because Mars is in Cancer. Mars is moving through your sign. It's actually about to go stationary direct. On Monday, Mars comes to a standstill, and the Sun is making a sesquiquadrate to Mars. So that Sun sesquiquadrate Mars is going to make you very stubborn, I think. You're going to want to hold on to what you believe in, and you might even be prepared to fight for it and argue about it, and you won't care too much if friendships get disrupted or associations get disrupted. So you're going to want to hold on tight to what you believe in, and you have to ask yourself whether that really is the right approach. It may not always be the right approach. Is it worth fighting for? Is it worth making a fool of yourself for something that is a matter of principle? So you have to make that choice. And Sun sesquiquadrate Mars, in certain cases, Sun sesquiquadrate Mars can make you a bit accident prone. You might be in too much of a hurry to do something. You might not want to wait, and because you don't wait, you create a situation which turns out to be less than fortunate. And obviously, you don't want to do yourself an injury, whether it's in terms of your reputation or whether it's in terms of your physical being. So be aware of that Sun sesquiquadrate Mars, and don't push things further than you need to. Leo. I was just talking to Cancer, and I was just talking about a sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Mars, and this sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Mars does affect you. I mean, it must affect you because the Sun is your ruler. And so with the Sun sesquiquadrate Mars, Leo, there could be things that you're quite angry about. You want to assert yourself. You feel that now is the time, and you may be quite easy to offend. If you don't like the way things are going, or someone says something, you could just feel annoyed. Sun sesquiquadrate Mars. Mars is really stirring up the Sun, and it's a Sun in Pisces, so that might indicate deeper feelings. That's one way in which it could work. Real anger, the anger that is not always revealed but is nonetheless there. And Mars is in Cancer, so Mars in the end will get into Leo. I don't know when it is. It's in April. Mars moves into Leo, but that's not for some time. And while Mars is in Cancer, there is this sense, Leo, in which you're better off keeping some things to yourself. And if you do get angry about something over the course of the day, it's not necessarily the best approach to tell everyone about how you feel. I know that there is this view that we should always be open, tell people what we feel, don't keep things to yourself, but that's not always the case. Some things have to be worked on. We have to work out why we feel angry, or if we do express ourselves to the full, we don't know how other people are going to respond. And this Sun sesquiquadrate Mars is kind of asking you to show a certain amount of caution and discretion, And we also need to think about your strength. What do you do to make yourself feel strong? Getting annoyed, showing your anger doesn't make you strong. It probably weakens your position. You should be concentrating on other things. For example, the Sun is in mutual reception to Venus. The Sun has been in Pisces for a couple of days. It's in the exaltation sign of Venus. Venus is in Aries, the exaltation sign of the Sun. So that's what you should be concentrating on. You are stronger than you realize, and you're not going to make yourself stronger just by showing your irritation or by pushing your weight around or barking orders. That's just not the way to do it. You instead should be thinking about diplomacy. You can be diplomatic. You can make an effort to understand people, give people what they want up to a certain point. If there's something that bothers you, there are many ways in which you can show your irritation, and you can do it in a way that is subtle, that is tactful, that doesn't cause offense. And also you benefit from the fact that the moon is moving into Sagittarius. So over the course of the day, it might be very late in the day if you're in Australia or New Zealand, or even into tomorrow, but over the course of the day, the moon is moving out of Scorpio into Sagittarius. And Leo, I do think that makes things a lot easier for you. With the moon in Scorpio, it was just a little bit too self-obsessed, I think. Really thinking about yourself and your immediate surroundings, and perhaps not always being particularly positive about what is possible. And now that the moon is moving into Sagittarius, moon is moving into a fire sign, you have a more constructive attitude, and you can do things that you enjoy. And when you're doing something you enjoy, you're just going to be in better spirits. And not just that you're going to find that other people will respond to you better. And so think about what you're doing, and it's not a time to be doing anything out of pure duty. And if something is a chore, do you really need to do it? Do you want to do it? Maybe you've actually, at some level, find it easier or more comfortable to do something which is a bit of a chore, because there's no challenge. You're just doing something. It might be boring, but you don't have to take any risks. But when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it's time to open up and look at what is possible, and don't feel that anyone is holding you up. So that's the way to do it. And this Sun sesquiquadrate Mars, it could be dangerous. It could be physically dangerous in extreme situations. It's not a time to be playing around with sharp objects or guns or things like that with Sun sesquiquadrate Mars. And so allow this Sun sesquiquadrate Mars to work on a private level, provided it doesn't get out of hand. If it does get out of hand, and you really do feel that something has to give, well, there may be ways of expressing your views just without causing World War III. That really is possible. And also, Sun sesquiquadrate Mars can be about exercise. It's quite a muscular, physical combination. And so if you get some exercise, provided it's reasonable exercise, provided it's not exaggerated, provided it doesn't contradict some medical regimen you're on, and it's the usual stuff about not doing anything to hurt yourself, but a bit of physical exercise, provided it's not extreme physical exercise, the kind of physical exercise that maybe you weren't planning on doing, but you just do it anyway, and it's not extreme, could just help you feel more relaxed, and that might be a useful way of using that Sun sesquiquadrate Mars. Virgo, Mercury is your ruler, and today Mercury is square Jupiter. And I regard this Mercury-Jupiter square as actually being quite an important aspect. I mean, Mercury is your ruler, it's square Jupiter. Mercury and Jupiter are in mutual reception, and it allows you to make the most of things, and it allows you to use the resources that are available. And you shouldn't underestimate human resources, because other people do matter, and other people can be helpful. And this is especially the case if there's something you want to do, you've got some ambition, and you regard it as being really important that you get it together. You don't have to feel that it's all down to you. And with Mercury square Jupiter, it does seem that assistance is available, and you may get help from someone who you wouldn't normally think would be available. It may be someone who is in authority, someone who for some reason or one reason or another you feel has a higher status than you. And if you just make some effort to get in touch with them, you might be favourably surprised by their response. And yeah, Virgo, you do not have to be doing everything on your own. And while other people can be important, they can be helpful, you want to make sure that you're not overwhelmed by people. You know, we have a lot of stuff now in Pisces, in your opposite sign, you know, especially now that the Sun has gone into Pisces. You know, Sun, Mercury, Saturn, Neptune, North Node, and with all of those planets and points in Pisces, you know, there is a possibility that you lose touch with yourself because you're trying so hard to understand other people, give what other people want, but give people what they want, that you just might lose touch with it all. And what you might have to do, Virgo, is to decide who is important, who is not important, you know, who can help you at this particular moment in time. You know, not everyone is useful. And there is an indication that you might have to bid farewell to someone, or maybe a situation or a scene. It may be over. You may have a recognition that it's over. And I certainly don't mean that in a negative way. In fact, it can feel good to realize that something has reached the end of its useful life. I mean, relationships can reach the end of their useful life. And so, you know, have another look at the people that you're regularly interacting with. And yeah, I think that some of those people can be really useful, but a couple of those people, maybe their use is something about the past. I mean, use sounds a bit selfish, but it works both ways. You might have been useful to another person for a long period of time. They might have been useful to you, but that mutual benefit and mutual gain may be moving from the present to the past. And yeah, being ready to say goodbye. And goodbye doesn't mean to say that relationships have broken down. It may not even be a permanent state of affairs. You know, I'm talking about an aspect that is quite short-lived. You know, you can actually see it in the chart. It relates to Mercury. You can see that Mercury is kind of conjunct Saturn, and it's kind of conjunct the Sun. So Mercury is kind of halfway between the Sun and Saturn, and so you could say Mercury is on the Sun-Saturn midpoint, and that can be about farewells, and that's what I mean. But it's certainly not a farewell to everyone. And going back to relationships, you know, Mercury square Jupiter, Mercury and Jupiter are in mutual reception to one another. And so that actually can improve relationships. And so maybe what we're talking about is the concentration of relationships. If you've got too many people that you're dealing with, then you can't give the right people the attention they deserve. So by removing some people from your life or distancing yourself, you're giving yourself a chance to get closer to other people. And that's something that today you can do. I mean, not just today. I mean, Mercury is going to be in mutual reception to Jupiter for some time. And so the relationships that you really value, I do think that you can really make the most of them. And I'm not just talking about personal relationships. I'm talking about relationships that could exist in one area. For example, working relationships, or a relationship connected with some interest you have, which, outside that interest, that relationship doesn't exist. And it doesn't have to be a face-to-face relationship. It can be an online relationship, whatever it is. But that Mercury square Jupiter can strengthen it. But don't feel that you have to be, out and about all day long. The moon is moving into Sagittarius, and with the moon moving into Sagittarius, which is, Sagittarius is at the bottom of the chart, this sign, and you have to make sure that you've always got an escape route, that there's somewhere you can always go to at short notice. You do what you can to interact, but then once you've done whatever you have to do, you can quickly retreat. Being able to quickly retreat does really matter with that moon in Sagittarius, and you must never forget your own structure and organization, especially with the moon making a sextile to Pluto. So moon sextile Pluto actually might mean that you can change things about your everyday life, perhaps change them in quite a dramatic way, and it just makes things a little bit easier. So if you've been doing something at the same time every day for a long period of time, maybe that timing is no longer suitable. You might want to change the time. Or if there's been something that has been a part of your routine for a long period of time, does it need to be part of your routine anymore? Perhaps something else needs to be brought into your routine. But these are mild changes. I'm not telling you should disrupt everything and turn everything upside down. But moon and the moon sextile Pluto, it's a sextile. It's not a heavy duty aspect like an opposition. And with moon sextile Pluto, you can make some quiet changes to the structure of your life, which can make you happier and healthier. Libra. The moon is edging into Sagittarius. That somewhat depends where you are. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, moon in Sagittarius, well, it doesn't really happen until very late this evening. But in the Americas, moon is in Sagittarius fairly early today. And if you're in Europe or Africa, the last half of the day the moon is in Sagittarius. So with moon moving into Sagittarius, you're feeling a little bit better, I would have said. You're feeling that there's a little bit less pressure. And moon in Sagittarius gives you greater scope for doing things that you enjoy, and there may be less restriction on you. So if there are places you want to go, then now might be your chance to go there. And also with moon in Sagittarius, it should benefit you in terms of getting through to people. It might have been difficult to get through to people, but now with moon moving into Sagittarius, making a sextile to Pluto, you have a chance to find the right way of getting in touch with people that matter to you, and you can start enjoying things more. And some of the sort of material concerns which might have been bothering you while the moon was in Scorpio might be sort of receding, and So I think that in some respects you can feel sort of more relaxed. But that doesn't mean to say that there is nothing that needs to be done today, that there is no seriousness today. There is a little bit of seriousness today, because there is a sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Mars. Now, this Sun-Mars sesquiquadrate, it has a positive manifestation and it has a negative manifestation. As far as a negative manifestation is concerned, that Sun-Mars sesquiquadrate may say something about the outside world and other people and how other people are behaving, because Sun and Mars, two very sort of powerful masculine planets, aspecting each other, and both planets in their own way are quite strong, because Mars, well, at least getting stronger. I mean, Mars might seem to be in Cancer, which is the sign of its fall, but Mars is very prominent at the moment because it's about to go stationary direct, and also it's in a water sign. Mars is not entirely weak in a water sign, because Mars rules the water signs, and then the Sun is in mutual reception with Venus by exaltation. So Sun sesquiquadrate Mars can represent strong people, and people who you have to deal with on a regular basis may be stronger than usual, or at least they may be more assertive than usual. They may feel that they want to be paid attention to, and they may feel that you should do things their way, and that could be annoying, and that could sort of upset your equilibrium. I mean, that really is possible. But there is another way of looking at that Sun sesquiquadrate Mars. It can actually be very constructive. It can be about doing things, doing a lot of things, and really making considerable progress. And perhaps you have to decide how this Sun sesquiquadrate Mars is going to occur in your life. If you give other people power, if you're prepared to do things other people's way, then the Sun sesquiquadrate Mars could be a very difficult influence. On the other hand, if you decide that you are going to own this Sun sesquiquadrate Mars, and it's going to motivate you, and you're going to put yourself in a position where you can really be the one who decides what happens, and you're not going to be overwhelmed by strong characters. In fact, you can be the strong character yourself. That is something you absolutely can do. And yeah, you're going to be helped by the fact that the moon is sextile Pluto. Moon sextile Pluto means that you will have a certain way with words, and if you want to use words to get your way, then I think you can. Just think about the result you'd like to happen. How would you like things to turn out? Think about that, communicate it, and then I think that you're going to be very pleased with the result. And also, Libra, there's something in the world around you that is pressing for action. Something needs to happen, and someone has to realize what the world wants, and that person can be you. You can feel the dynamism all around you, and it can become part of you. And if you make the decision, or not the decision, or it is a decision as well, but before the decision it has to be a realization. So if you have the realization that something needs to be done, and it doesn't really matter who does it, but someone needs to recognize this need for action. And if it's you, and it can be you, it should be you, then you can be the one who takes the initiative. And so, Libra, that might actually mean that there is a certain amount of responsibility there. So ask yourself, Libra, what is your responsibility today? What does the universe want you to do? It's the kind of thing that you don't really want to do it. It just feels easier not to do it but you know you should do it, and you can see the reasons why it has to be done. And if you can understand that, and if you can understand what the universe is telling you, indeed what the world is telling you, the spirit of the world, what that is telling you, where it is moving you, and if you can pick up on that, you'll be doing the right thing, and you'll be aligning with the cosmos, and therefore you will be attracting lots of good fortune. Scorpio. Scorpio, the Sun is making a sesquiquadrate to Mars, and this is an aspect that is exact, and I regard this aspect as being pretty important, and it's important for a Scorpio. And the reason it's important for a Scorpio is because Mars is your ruler, and Mars is very much at the center of attention at the moment, because it's going stationary retrograde, and it's about to go stationary direct. People talk a lot about Mars retrograde and how bad Mars retrograde is. I mean, it's not that bad. You've been experiencing it since December the 6th, and you've survived, I assume. And now that Mars is going stationary direct, it does put a lot of focus on Mars. And Mars is prominent. And this prominent Mars is getting a sesquiquadrate from the Sun. And that gives you, I would have said, a lot of strength. You're in a position to really make things happen. And it's not easy. It's a dynamic process. And if you want to make something happen, it's very likely that some people are going to be upset. They're not going to like it. You might cause offense. Again, that's how the sesquiquadrate is working. It is an aspect of tension, and you have to use this tension and even enjoy the tension. We use words like aggression and assertion, and it all seems to be a little bit of an effort. But if you're a Scorpio, particularly a Scorpio now, you need evidence that something is happening. And one piece of evidence is looking at how people respond. So if you're trying to do something, people responding to what you're trying to do, even if it's a negative response, it's a response. And it may also link with your own creative self-expression. Creative self-expression is not easy. Creativity can actually be a violent process, a process where things get smashed, where things get broken up. Because if they're not smashed or broken up, how can they reform? And so that's something you can do. And many Scorpios, they might have an iconoclastic streak. So iconoclasm, that's breaking up things which people regard as being sacred. People have treated these things very seriously, and then Scorpio wants to come along and smash it all up. And that might be an inclination that you have. I mean, I'm not saying that you should literally smash things up, but I think you should question the accepted order. And it may not be being done in the right way. And you are someone that I really do think that you can create change, and you're someone who also needs to be taken seriously. And while all this is going on, the moon is starting to move into Sagittarius. I mean, moon moving into Sagittarius is not this dramatic thing like the sun sesquiquadrate Mars. It's sort of more of a routine day-to-day kind of thing, moon moving into Sagittarius. And with the moon moving into Sagittarius, it makes a sextile to Pluto. That might be about what you have and what you want in a material sense. And there could be a few financial issues that need to be contemplated, with moon sextile Pluto. But it's a sextile. I mean, it is a fortunate aspect. And what we might be seeing here with moon sextile Pluto is that you might have a resource that you just haven't been using it, and it could help you, maybe in a financial sense, but not necessarily so. But it's just an unused resource, and this resource has perhaps particularly started to come into focus since November, when Pluto moved into Aquarius. And the moon sextile Pluto, if you open your eyes, you can actually start to see how this resource can be used. And I'm not saying that it's going to be totally dramatic. It's just a moon sextile Pluto. It's not a very unusual aspect, but it's an aspect that I think that you really can take advantage of it. Sagittarius. Moon is moving into your sign, and Moon moving into Sagittarius, it's very welcome, I think, because with the Moon in Scorpio, you might have felt that you weren't fully yourself, that at some level you had to hold something back, and you couldn't be honest. And of course, if you're a Sagittarius, you like to be honest and you like to say things as they are. But with the Moon moving into Sagittarius, there's a sense that you've got your old self back. And the Moon, when it moves into Sagittarius, it makes a sextile to Pluto, and so Moon sextile Pluto is a very conversational aspect, and Sagittarians are very good at moving things on in terms of what they say. Sometimes what they say is rather tactless, but still, you state the obvious and you get a response. And so, moon sextile Pluto is going to allow you to be quite influential, and the things you say will be noticed. And the other thing going on today is the square between Mercury and Jupiter. Now, this Mercury-Jupiter square has been forming for some time, and Mercury and Jupiter are in sesquiquadrate they're square one another. So Mercury square Jupiter means that there is a strong relationship between Mercury and Jupiter, and it might be somewhat challenging. Part of you wants to do things on your own, in your own way, and you want to be comfortable. You almost want to put up the do not disturb sign. That might be how you feel. But with Mercury square Jupiter, there's a challenge coming from outside, and you have to consider what other people are saying, even what other people are demanding. And you can't just tell someone you disagree with them, or you're just going to say no. That's not what you want to do. You have to work with it. It's not a situation where you've got rights and wrongs, where one person asks, the other person refuses. It's about negotiation, and that Mercury square Jupiter allows you to negotiate with another person, or it might be a company or an organization. You negotiate with them, you say what you want, they say what they want, and you get an idea about what is possible. And that can be how the Mercury square Jupiter works. And the Mercury square Jupiter can also be relevant for relationships, because Jupiter's your ruler, Mercury rules your 7th house, or your opposite sign, Gemini. So with Mercury square Jupiter, that says something about how you and the important people in your life are relating to one another, and you don't see eye to eye. I mean, it's not quite that you're totally opposite in terms of your views, but there's a certain mismatch in terms of how you see the world and how you approach different problems. And it's a mismatch that can be worked through because Mercury and Jupiter are in mutual reception. And you do have the capacity, Sagittarius, as you actually have done for a long time, because ever since Jupiter went into Gemini last year, ever since then, you have had the capacity to look at things from another person's point of view. And with this Mercury square Jupiter, that capacity is especially strong. You might not want to look at someone's things from another person's point of view, but you can, and you can do it very well. And if you demonstrate this ability, it really will be appreciated. And you will get people's attention, and you will get people's appreciation and support. Additionally, Sagittarius, recently there's been a feeling that something big is brewing around you. It's not in a sense your problem, but you can feel it. You can feel a sense of revolutionary change. I think I've talked about it before when looking at your chart, your horoscope, but it does seem especially pressing today. And so, Sagittarius, ask yourself, what is it? Where is this change that is being demanded? The world is demanding this change. Things can't go on like they have been before. And you, Sagittarius, are someone who right now can be a bit of a rebel. In fact, more than a rebel. You can be the person who initiates change, who says that this is no good. Things can't keep going on like this. And again, you're not just talking about yourself, you're talking about everything around you. And there are probably other people like you who have the same feelings. Maybe you haven't at the moment got in touch with them, but you're not alone. And so there are people like you, people who are tuned into the universe, who know what's going on, and you feel things in different ways because you're an individual, but it's all moving towards the same thing. So maybe, Sagittarius, you should consider yourself as part of a movement. People all around the world, they're connected to something on a collective level. So do consider that. And you might get some clues from things very much connected with the collective unconscious. For example, random thoughts, or maybe your dreams. Where are your dreams pushing you? And where are coincidences pushing you? Look at the coincidences around you, and what do they say about your role in the wider world and its development. Capricorn, the moon is starting to move into Sagittarius, and so with the moon moving into Sagittarius, you are getting a certain perspective. It's always good to get a perspective. Things are happening, you can see things are happening, and at times you may be very much part of the action. But the trouble is that, when you are part of the action, it can very often be difficult to know what's happening. And it just may be that as the moon moves into Sagittarius over the next couple of days, you have a chance to see things in a different way, and you don't have to be a central player. That I think is unnecessary, and instead you can influence things in a more indirect way, and perhaps helped by the fact that when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it makes a sextile to Pluto. So you have this influence which isn't immediately obvious, but you don't have to shout about it, and you can just watch things as they develop. And in the process, you're not really going to lose touch with anyone. You are someone who is always connected, especially now you are connected to other people. They know you're there. They always know you're there, even if you're not physically present. And so keeping in touch is just not going to be not going to be a problem. And also, Capricorn, you might want to reflect on the fact that it is the last quarter of this lunar cycle. So we've got a new moon at the end of the month. I think it's on February the 28th. And so the moon now is square the sun. And at this last quarter, it's always a good idea to reflect on what has happened since the beginning of this lunar cycle. Since the new moon on January the 29th. What has happened and how's it been working out? And with this last quarter moon, there's a moment of awareness where you see what has been achieved, and I think a lot has been achieved, but you're also aware of what has not been achieved, and you realize that you haven't got all the time in the world. Now, it's not that over the next couple of days you have to put everything you've got into covering lost ground. It's not like that. In fact, you may be able to wait until the moon moves into Capricorn. So the moon moves into Capricorn, over the weekend, and when the moon moves into your sign over the weekend, that will be a real chance to get things moving. If something hasn't been working or has been delayed or postponed, now will be the time to get things back on the rails. But at the moment, Capricorn, I don't think there's any pressure on you. There's pressure on other people, but I don't think that there is much pressure on you, or at least there needn't be pressure. It is true, though, that the Sun is making a sesquiquadrate to Mars. Mars is moving through Cancer, your opposite sign. Mars may represent another person. Sun sesquiquadrate Mars could represent a person who feels they've got a lot to say and they want a lot of attention. And the question is, how do you deal with them? Just because someone says something dramatic doesn't mean that you should take them seriously. It doesn't matter how angry someone is. Anger is temporary. Let people's annoyance and anger burn off before you decide what to do. And don't allow yourself to be surprised by another person's temper or by their rudeness, and don't pass judgment. With Sun sesquiquadrate Mars, people could be behaving in all sorts of ways. It is not necessarily a reflection of who they are. They just may be responding to what's going on around them. And over the next couple of days, you can observe, and it may not be until the weekend that you're ready to take center stage again and try to integrate everything and decide on what your next move is going to be. Aquarius, the moon is moving into Sagittarius, and with the moon in Sagittarius, you feel you're quite good about it, and this moon is making a sextile to Pluto. So moon sextile Pluto, Pluto is of course in your sign. So with moon sextile Pluto today, I think that you'll have little difficulty making your presence felt. People will accept you. They'll understand what you're about. If you meet people, I think that you'll be quite successful. I think your social skills at the moment are pretty good. I'm not saying they're spectacular, but they're better than average, and you'll know what it takes to get attention, and you won't be a drama king or a drama queen. That's not you, but you will be able to sort of relax in other people's company, and it just may be as simple as that. Now, there is a last quarter moon. Today is the last quarter, and when the sun and when the sun and the moon are square. So on January the 29th, the end of last month, there was a new moon, and that was the beginning of the new lunar cycle, and it was also the beginning of the Chinese New Year. And so this first lunar cycle of the Chinese New Year, I mean, I'm not really talking about Chinese astrology from any position of authority. I'm just pointing out that this just happens to be the first lunar month of the new year, of a new Chinese year. But anyway, this lunar cycle comes to an end on February the 28th, and it is an Aquarius cycle. That new moon on January 29th was in Aquarius, and it should have been for you a new beginning. You enjoyed the Aquarius season. Okay, the Aquarius season has now come to an end. The sun is now in Pisces, but still, in some respects, it's still there because we haven't reached the end of the lunar cycle. And so, with this last quarter moon, this is a reminder to you that what started on January the 29th is coming to an end, and this might be a situation where you thought that something was too late. You thought you missed your chance. You might be very sure that you missed your chance. And this last quarter moon tells you, no, actually this isn't the case. It's almost like there's been an extension. And so you might have an extension of perhaps a week, 10 days, less than 10 days. You've got an extension till the end of a month when you thought it was over. So if you think you right now that you've missed the boat on something, now's your chance. Give it another go, because you have an opportunity with this last quarter moon to really see something through, and you can almost reactivate something. And you have to be quick. I mean, you don't have to be in a desperate hurry, but you have to be quick about it. And you may be able to save a situation which you thought you'd lost. That is going to require some work, but it really isn't impossible. And so, Aquarius, perhaps that's what you should be focusing on. And today, with this last quarter moon, there may be a certain realization that it really isn't too late. Pisces. Of course, the sun is now in your sign. You're enjoying the sun in your sign. At least I hope you're enjoying the sun in your sign. It's at noon New York time. The sun is at 2:18 of the sign, and the sun is, of course, in mutual reception with Venus by exaltation, because Sun and Venus are in each other's exaltation signs. So that makes you strong, and it makes you aware, and it allows you to look after yourself. But the sun in Pisces is making a sesquiquadrate to Mars, and I do think that sesquiquadrate might have an impact on you. So Sun sesquiquadrate Mars may actually be very motivating. You may feel that now's your chance. You want to do stuff. You don't want to hang around doing nothing. And you might want to sort of propel yourself to new heights, or perhaps you want to have another look at something maybe relating to your creativity, and perhaps you haven't pushed yourself hard enough, and that Sun sesquiquadrate Mars can give you all the encouragement you need. And try to use that Sun sesquiquadrate Mars in a constructive way. It can actually be, the Sun sesquiquadrate Mars, it can be quite an angry pairing. That's certainly possible, but it needn't be. And if you can just ask yourself what you want and what you would like to happen, and then just go and make it happen. And if possible, don't get involved too heavily with other people. I mean, or at least in a conflict way. Don't feel that you're being held back by another person. That's not the case. It can't be the case. If something is really important at a spiritual level, no one can hold you back. They might appear to hold you back, but it would be a figment of your imagination, or a projection, or just an excuse for inaction. And the other big aspect we've got is Mercury square Jupiter. And that Mercury square Jupiter, it's exact today. And Jupiter's your ruler. And that Mercury square Jupiter is, the two planets are in mutual reception. I think that this aspect could actually be very fortunate. And it could not just give you a lot of strength, but it could actually allow you to get closer to other people. It is a sociable aspect. You could say that Mercury represents the other person, because Mercury rules Virgo, your opposite sign. So Mercury's in Pisces, and Mercury's in your sign. So you've got someone who has a high opinion of you, thinks you're wonderful, or at least they could think you're wonderful if you gave them the chance. And Mercury square Jupiter, there's a little bit of tension there. You can't get on with everyone absolutely. There's always going to be conflicts. But just because you have a conflict with someone, just because you have disagreements, doesn't mean that they can't play an important role in your life. And so, in a social sense, and in a relationship sense, you've got to really look at people as whole people, as look at the whole person. And a superficial conflict is not the end of the matter. And Mercury square Jupiter may just allow you to really forge new relations with people, and to have mutual respect for each other's differences. So that is a real possibility with Mercury square Jupiter. Mercury square Jupiter can say something about your home as well, and there may be things about your home that you want to pay attention to. It's all very well, it's all looking good, but not quite good enough, and there might be some alterations of arrangement. Something needs to be rearranged. I mean, not necessarily in terms of decoration. It could just be that you need a new attitude, or other people need a new attitude if you're sharing living space with other people. And so that Mercury square Jupiter could be about minor family disagreements. You want something more, and someone else wants something else, and you can't quite agree. And it's possible that you could retreat into an argument, or two positions. I mean, the Sun is sesquiquadrate Mars. So Sun sesquiquadrate Mars for all of us, regardless of our sign, creates tension and the potential for an argument. But in a family sense, or a domestic sense, keep it at a verbal level and try to understand, and through discussion and constructive argument, it might be that some resolution is actually possible. And that's it. The kettle's going, and it's time to end my forecast for the 12 signs and to consider things from a perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 24, which is return. Now, this hexagram does not have any moving lines, so it's locked. That might indicate that not a great deal is happening today. Even though the Sun is sesquiquadrate Mars, even though Mercury is square Jupiter. Despite all of that, on a personal level, you coming into this sort of I Ching reading and locked hexagram. Where are things moving to? Now, let's have a look at this hexagram. So this hexagram represents, represents a lot of negativity here, because we've got the top 5 lines are all broken, but then the bottom line is unbroken. So that bottom line, it represents something new coming onto the scene, and that is maybe the return. Things are returning to normal, and when we talk about return, it may be that we have made a decision to go somewhere, because you can't really talk about return unless you've gone out in the first place. So you go out in the first place and you make your moves. And the return does indicate that you've got an enormous amount of freedom. You can go this way, you can go that way, you can go in all sorts of different directions. It doesn't matter. You're not going to come to too much harm, within reason. And so you go as far as you can go. You can. You move this way, you move that way, and then at a certain point, you realize, well, I've gone as far as I can. I can't do any more. And so, with that in mind, I can go back to my starting point. And it's okay. It's not like an admission of defeat. It's not like you were sort of having this big struggle, you lost and you retreated. Retreat is not the same as return. There is a hexagram for retreat, hexagram 33, but this is not hexagram 33, it's return. And it's something you do once you've understood the lay of the land. I mean, it might be a reconnaissance mission. You go out, you see what's going on. You always were planning on returning in the end, and you come back. And the nuclear hexagram for return is hexagram number 2, which is the receptive. So receptive is all broken lines. And that's not about taking the initiative. And so when we look at the return, bearing in mind what the nuclear hexagram is, we are to a great extent going with the flow. We're going as far as we can. We're not desperate to make a point. I know that the sun is sesquiquadrate Mars, and that's quite a dangerous aspect astrologically. But it seems that we're not going to be influenced by that. We're just going to go as far as we can. We're going to be quite passive about it. We're not going to deliberately trying to create things. We're not trying to see through any advantage. We do what we can, and then we just come back. And it's an absolutely reasonable and healthy thing to do. And now I want to consider the Pope. And last time I looked at the news, he was alive. He has double pneumonia, but he's up. He's reading and praying. So at the time of this recording, there's nothing bad going on to him that we don't already know about. And so let's look at the Pope's chart. I am not going to say anything dramatic here, and it doesn't feel right anyway. I mean, it doesn't feel right. There's this sort of medieval concept that astrologers would spend a lot of time predicting people's death. That was a mark of the skill of an astrologer. If you look at Placidus's book, The Primum Mobile, Placidus, of course, created the Placidus house system. The book is filled with examples of him making successful predictions of people dying, and there are other astrologers who do this. I think Goricus did this, and of course John Worsdale. But when you're predicting the death of popes and kings, that's a dangerous thing to do. So here is Francis's chart. So he was born December the 17th, 1936, at 9 o'clock in the evening in Buenos Aires, and he's a Sagittarius, and I don't think there's a great deal I want to say about his chart. He is a Sagittarius, and this is a reminder that Sagittarius is, or can be, quite a religious sign. It can also be a very atheistic sign. A lot of Sagittarians are atheists, and they don't believe in things like astrology. But at the same time, the sun in Sagittarius, it's ruled by Jupiter. There is a Jupiter element to it, and Jupiter is about what we believe in. And so it's kind of not surprising that a Sagittarian would be attracted to the church. Because it's all about knowledge, isn't it? The Sagittarius is a fire sign. It knows, it doesn't just believe, it just knows there is a God out there, or at least it can know there's a God out there. And so that's his sun in Sagittarius. And it's the sun in Sagittarius conjunct the North Node. So you would interpret that as being service, North Node in the 6th house. And so service through the church, through ordination, becoming a priest, is the right thing to do for him. It's what he's done with his life, with his sun conjunct the North Node in the 6th house, seems absolutely appropriate. And I'm not going to sort of go into all his reasons to criticize him, except to say, well, I think there were some criticisms of him when he became Pope, that he was perhaps too friendly at a time towards the junta in Argentina. Remember, there was a long time when Argentina was ruled by the generals, and extremely unpleasant fascistic regime in Argentina. People would disappear, leftists would be kidnapped, murdered, all sorts of terrible things would happen. And it wasn't until Argentina lost the Falklands War that the generals finally collapsed. And he was accused of being too close to them. I mean, there are alternative views, but maybe the sun in Sagittarius can be quite conservative, and perhaps when he was younger he was quite conservative. I don't know. I don't really want to go into that, but you can link that with sun in Sagittarius. I mean, Pinochet was a Sagittarius. The Chilean dictator Franco in Spain was a Sagittarius. So that's his chart. I don't really want to say much more about it, except to say, well, he has got Uranus on the midheaven. So Uranus on the midheaven, maybe two things I want to say about his chart. Uranus on the midheaven, sudden changes. And certainly Uranus on the midheaven suddenly becoming Pope. I mean, that would fit Uranus on the midheaven. Also, Pluto square the midheaven. And so Pluto square his midheaven has a certain intensity about it, and maybe quite an ambition about it. We might not see this ambition immediately, but he's got Pluto in Cancer in the 1st house, and he wants to create change, but it's square his midheaven, so there are things he wants to do, and so he may be more ambitious than he claims. Oh, and he's got Jupiter in Capricorn. Jupiter in Capricorn can put itself first. Okay, it might be in the 7th house. So you could say that Jupiter in Capricorn would represent, of course, it's fallen in Capricorn, but you could say that Jupiter in Capricorn represents his ambitions. He wants to be successful. He wants to reach the top of the ladder, the top of the ecclesiastical ladder, but it's in the 7th house. He's kind of projecting it. He's not owning it. He's letting it go. He's always seeing it in terms of other people, or he's letting other people advance his career without him necessarily doing anything. But it doesn't change the fact that he has got Jupiter in Capricorn, and that Jupiter in Capricorn is trine Uranus, and Jupiter is square the midheaven. I mean, okay, his midheaven may or may not be in Taurus. I mean, 9 p.m. is a rather round time. I mean, he was born before or after 9 o'clock. He might have been born at 5 to 9. He might have been born at 5 past 9. His midheaven might be in late Aries, but still, he does have Jupiter on the midheaven, and whether he plans it or not, that is quite good for his own ambitions and for pushing forward with his ambitions. So, what is happening to the Pope right now? What kind of transits is he experiencing? Now, he has got his Saturn at 16 Pisces. So if we look at what is happening today, you can see that Saturn at the moment is at 19 Pisces. So essentially, he's just had his Saturn return, and he turned 88 at his last birthday, and that is a reminder that every 29 years we have a Saturn return. So at 29 approximately, we have a Saturn return. Then in our late 50s, we have a Saturn return, and then we have that Saturn return in our very late 80s. And so, they mark different stages in life, don't they? So that Saturn return we have at 29, it says something about our beginnings and how we look back at how we have grown up or not grown up at 29, and we have moments of realization and what have we achieved, what we've not achieved. And in our late 50s, so as many people are approaching the end of their working life in their late 50s, the Saturn return, they sort of start to think, what more do I have to do? Of course, people have a few years left after 20 before they retire. People retire. I suppose people are retiring later and later now, but if you take 65 as a standard retirement age, if you've got a standard job and you've got a pension, and 65 is an age. So with that Saturn return, the second Saturn return, you just got a bit left. You might have 5-6 years left before you retire. And it's the same thing with that third Saturn return in one's late 80s. So one perhaps looks back at the last few decades as what one has done since retirement, what one has achieved, and what one has not achieved. But 88 is not necessarily the end. If to get to 100, you do need to get past 88. But there may be a reflection about what one has achieved since retirement and what one still wants to achieve before the final end. So that's his Saturn return, and it can be a difficult time when one does have to sort of reflect, and it might well be that when Saturn went over his Saturn, when he had his Saturn return. When did he have his Saturn return? That would have been he would have had his Saturn return sort of end of January, so last month. So maybe it was his Saturn return that's when he started to become sick. I don't know. I haven't been following things, but that is certainly a possibility. Now, in terms of transits, do I see anything especially dramatic? I would have said that I don't. I don't see any major aspects that are really seriously influencing him. I mean, Mars is about to go stationary direct. It's Mars is in his first moving through his first house. It's not directly aspecting anything. Soon enough, he will have Mars square Mars, but that's not for a bit of time. Mars square Mars. I mean, when is Mars square Mars? It's he will have Mars square his Mars, in about a month, in sort of mid-February. So that could be a difficult time for him. But it's just Mars square Mars. I wouldn't have seen that aspect as in itself as being especially important. So those are a few ideas about his transits, and there's his solar return. So he had his birthday are in December. And so here is his solar return for last year. Now, I always set my solar returns for the place of birth, but rather than the place of residence. I think I will relocate to the place of residence in a moment. But looking at his place of birth, a solar return, and he's got a sun rising, and sun rising. Okay, 25 Sagittarius. Now, you probably already noticed that I've just missed out one of his transits. That he has his sun at 2554 Sagittarius. So that means that Saturn is sooner or later going to make a square to his sun. And in this solar return, you can see Neptune is square his sun. And that sun is prominent because it's close to the ascendant. And Neptune is close to the ascendant. And Neptune is in the fourth house. So, and Saturn is quite close to the IC. So his solar return set for Buenos Aires does indicate that he's under a little bit of pressure, and that pressure is coming from Neptune, and I suppose double pneumonia, you might see that as being quite a Neptunian thing. I mean, I think the reason why his this pneumonia is so bad is perhaps because when he was young, he lost a part of a lung. I'm not quite sure why. He had to have surgery and a great chunk of his lung was taken out. So that's going to make it more difficult if he's now got double pneumonia. Also, I should point out, that sun at 2554, yes, Saturn is going to be aspecting it. And Saturn will make that square to his sun at the beginning of April. So given the state of his health, mid-April, if he's, I'm not making any predictions about whether he's going to live or die or whatever, but mid-April, that could be tough for him. And so we have to remember that his predecessor didn't die in office. His predecessor just resigned. I mean, nowadays you don't just necessarily stay in office until you die. He may just decide to not hand over to someone else, but he might decide to step down, and they could elect a replacement, like happened with Pope Benedict. Benedict the 16th, is it? Cardinal Ratzinger before that. So that Saturn squaring his sun is something that could be quite debilitating. And we've got a new moon coming up in Pisces, and we've got a new moon coming up in Pisces 9:50 on January. Well, when is it? On February, at the end of the month at 9:41 Pisces, and so that new moon will be square his solar returns mid-heaven. So that's a solar return set for Buenos Aires. If you're interested, here is the solar return set for 88 years before he was born. So this is the solar return for December the 17th, 1848. His converse solar return, and in this converse solar return, Saturn is close to the ascendant, and again, that might be a hint that something is coming to an end, but that might not be his life. He may just decide that, why should he stay in office? So that is a possibility that we should certainly be looking at. Now, you might want to know about his solar return set for the Vatican. And although I like to use solar returns set for the birthplace, I think there are cases when the solar return set for where you're living can be relevant. So let's relocate this to the Vatican. And there is something important here, the fact that he's got Pluto rising. And so Pluto is within 1 degree of the ascendant for his Vatican solar return, and Uranus is on the IC. And so, and Mars is on the 7th house cusp. So it's actually quite a difficult solar return, relocated solar return for his place of residence. And, this may indicate that something really is happening, that there is going to be a dramatic change. Uranus on the IC, Pluto rising. But again, I must make it clear, I'm not talking about death here. I don't know. I'm not asking that question. But it may be about him retiring and just thinking, why should he stay in office? And we're going to see more of this over the next couple of months, provided he's okay. I hope he is okay. I hope everything's fine with him. I hope he gets over his double pneumonia. So there is also his solar arc directions. Now, solar arc directions, where you move everything 1 degree. So if we look at his solar arc directions, he's coming up for 90. I mean, in 2 years' time, he's going to be 90 years old. In less than 2 years' time, he's going to be 90 years old. And 90 is important from a solar arc direction approximately at that time, because 90 is, you've moved all the planets 90 degrees. So when you hit 90, approximately 90, it depends when exactly you were born in the year, everything is square everything. So his solar arc direction is his solar arc directed sun is at 2510 Pisces, and his solar arc directed, his natal sun is at 2554 Sagittarius. So the sun is approaching the square with his sun, and likewise everything. His natal moon is at 12 degrees 33 Aquarius, and his directed moon is at 1149 Taurus. So that 90 degrees, when by solar arc, when everything is squaring everything, which is over the next year, and it's probably just starting for him, it's a sort of a generic cycle. We're all going to experience that if we live that long, in our late 80s or around the age of 90 or approximately there, when from a solar arc point of view, everything we've got, we square to a square, and it just may be a crisis moment, and perhaps that's part of what is going on for him. And finally, I did ask a Horary chart about the Pope's health. I'm not really going to interpret this chart. I didn't feel I really wanted to. I just wanted to make some observations about it. And so I just asked a question about the Pope's health, what's going on. You might want to interpret this chart. I used the Regiomontanus house system because, William Lilly used the Regiomontanus house system, and my Horary astrology is sort of based around William Lilly's approach. And so the question is, where do you locate the Pope in a Horary chart? A question about the Pope. And William Lilly is absolutely clear about where you locate the Pope. Now, he asked a question so William Lilly asked this question in 1644. So in 1644, this was so William Lilly was working in the around the time of the English Civil War, and Parliament was flexing its muscles in terms of dealing with Charles I, and Charles I had these advisors who were very important to him. There was the Archbishop of Canterbury, Laud, and there was his chief advisor was Stafford. And when he asked this question, Laud was obviously in trouble, and Lilly asked the question, what manner of death Canterbury should die? In other words, how is the Archbishop of Canterbury going to die? And so William Lilly says, being a man of the church, his ascendant is Capricorn, the cusp of the 9th house. So, in other words, William Lilly is saying if you're dealing with a man of the church, you take the ninth house. I mean, it would have been nice to have gone into his interpretation in more detail. I mean, in the end, it is kind of an easy question for William Lilly, because there was only one way in which the Archbishop of Canterbury was going to die under those circumstances. Given he was in trouble, he was going to be beheaded, and that's, of course, what happened to the Archbishop of Canterbury. But you would look at the ninth house cusp, and so if you want to identify the Pope, again using a Regiomontanus house cusp, you've got 29 degrees 4 Taurus on the ninth house cusp. I think I've got this the degrees and latitude pretty much to the place I am right now. So 29 degrees 4 minutes Taurus. So there is this question: do you take the Pope as being Venus, ruler of the ninth, technical ruler of the ninth, because you've got 2904 2904 Taurus, but then you've got Gemini, the sign Gemini intercepted in the ninth house, and so you would say maybe that Mercury might rule the Pope. But then we got Jupiter in the ninth house, and Jupiter is symbolic of churchmen, clergy, natural significator of it. And because Mercury is in mutual reception to Jupiter, I would take the Pope as being Jupiter. So Jupiter in Gemini, Jupiter is in its detriment, so maybe not in great shape. On the other hand, Mercury is in mutual reception with Jupiter. I mean, Mercury is going to a conjunction of Saturn in the end. But we've also got the Moon. The Moon is in Scorpio in the Via Combusta. And so the Moon in the Via Combusta is making a trine to Mars. I mean, that doesn't look great, but does it affect the Pope himself? That would be the question. Moon trine Mars, yeah, but it's not like Mars is square Jupiter. Jupiter is in mutual reception. Jupiter is in the ninth. I would have said that mutual reception between Mercury and Jupiter may indicate a change in circumstances, and you could argue, but it could say that he might step down. I mean, that is possible, and Mercury might represent an exchange of positions. And I haven't really looked at this chart in detail. I'm not really trying to make any forecasts about it, but I just wanted to show you how you can use Horary astrology to really look at anything in terms of world events, and that would be what would include the fate of the Pope. But for some reason, I just don't feel that I should really look too hard at the Pope and what might be happening to him. But looking at astrology overall, I would have said that one might say that a change is coming up, and there is actually one more chart I should have looked at. I did want to look at. It's not the Pope's chart. It's not the chart of the Horary. It is the chart of the Pope's election. So this is the moment. Habemus Papam, when they saw the white smoke, indicating that they'd found a pope. And what I wanted to point out about this chart is that Mars is at 1 degree 9 Aries, and so Saturn and Neptune are moving into Aries. They are moving close to Mars, and so Saturn and Neptune are moving towards that Mars, and so that may represent pressure. Also, in June, Jupiter is going to be on the midheaven of Pope Francis's election chart, and I see Jupiter on the midheaven as being about losing a job or gaining a job. And so it could be, you could argue, that Jupiter on the midheaven is Jupiter transiting Jupiter on the midheaven represents a change of pope. I mean, that is a way of looking at it. And by the way, it was interesting that in the Horary, I asked about the Pope. Jupiter was in the ninth house. Jupiter was in the ninth house, and likewise, Jupiter is still in the ninth house. I've set popes for Pope's election with the Placidus house cusps. Let me just switch to the Regiomontanus house cusp to get some sort of equivalence. Now that is kind of interesting, isn't it? The time I asked, whether or not how the Pope was had Libra rising, and let me just go look at it. Just compare the two charts. Hold on, this is quite interesting. Something I hadn't noticed. So, I mean, I'm sticking to the Regiomontanus house cusps. So there was 2904 Taurus when I asked that question, and Jupiter was in the 11th house. And if we look at the Pope's election chart, we have very, very similar angle. Jupiter is pretty close, and also the angles are the same. And so I'm thinking that maybe that my question about Pope Francis does kind of represent the answer at some level. And if I want to be positive about it, and if I wanted to look at that horary in the best possible light, I think I would say that you take Mercury Jupiter mutual reception, change of positions, and this might be about the Pope stepping down, and that might be the way things resolve. I don't know, but I must make it clear I don't want to make any predictions about the Pope. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.